Hey guys, I got a quick video for you. I'm gonna go ahead and tint this back window. A couple things that you're gonna need when you get started. You're gonna need some soap and water, some kind of a squeegee. You're gonna need some bounce sheets like this, and some towels so you can clean and stuff like that. Make sure you cover up your interior. I'm not gonna go through the whole process. I'm just gonna go through the shrinking process here real quick. What I like to do is I like to clean the whole window with soap and water. Go ahead and clean that off. That's already been done. And then what you want to do is get some soap and water and get one of these bounce sheets, wet it, kind of rub it together, kind of create kind of almost like a paste, mist the window and kind of rub this all on there. So what this does is it creates kind of like a static effect where the film will stick to this. This makes it easier for you to shrink windows in one piece. Now, I've already done this. You want to let this dry for a while. So if you're working on the rest of the car, you go ahead and let this dry. Now you want to prep your window on the inside before you do this, because then you won't be able to see if you missed anything. So you want to go ahead and prep your window with soap and water, non-abrasive scrub pad, squeegee that out, clean all the edges and get that ready. I do have a little trick for you. I do have what I use for sale signs on the inside of this. The reason I do this, I use the white on here, and what happens is I put a light on the inside, and what it does is it reflects and it makes this black border show up a lot brighter, so that when I'm cutting out my film, it's easier to see. Some cars are a little bit harder, especially like if you're using kind of a limo tint. This is a 15% film, it's not a limo tint. So basically I just kind of line up a bunch of for sale signs all the way around and just flip them over to the white side. And then what I'll do is I'll turn on my light on the inside of the car, and then I'll turn off the shop light like this. And then as you can see the edges a lot better here. So I'm able to trace that out a lot easier. Now I do want to cut maybe like 1/8 of an inch all the way around. You want to look on the inside and see how much room you have. This car does not have a lot of room. This is a 2013 Honda Civic. It does not have a lot of room in this area right here and on the sides. So I really need to go like almost literally right on the edge when I get to this. This window does have a little bit of a curve going this way. So when I install it, it's gonna get like as if the film is bigger, because the glass on the inside would actually shrink on you. So the film's gonna seem like it's too big. So you do wanna trim it just right on the edge on this one. On the top, you do have room. On the bottom, you have a little bit of room. I don't like to cut too much, but I do like to leave a little small, maybe 1/8 of an inch, a 1/16 of an inch overhang, just in case you mess up. If you leave a little bit more on the top where you have room, you're able to shift the film and move it up and down. Sometimes when you're cutting, that blade might move a little bit, and then next thing you know, you don't go a straight cut. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna shut off this light. I'm gonna grab my film, grab my measuring tape, and measure this film. Now I use a 36-inch, 40-inch films, wide, so this window is like 26 inches. So I don't want to grab a big piece of 40-inch and put it up here and have it rubbing all on top of the car. So this is a 36-inch. It doesn't go up that high. I usually probably go here and then let it hang on the bottom of the car, and then I could trim it and grab it right here, and I have to grab it up there. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to measure from this edge to this edge, and I got about 43 inches roughly. So I'm going to cut this at maybe an inch over there. I'm going to cut this at about 45 inches. So I'm going to give myself a little overhang, and then I'll go ahead and then trim it when I get on the glass. Now we do want to anchor it when we get it on there, and I'll show you when I do that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this out real quick. I got my film over here. So I don't have 44 inches of room here, so I'm going to pull 22 inches, roll it up, and then pull another 22 inches. I'm gonna grab my film, pull the 22. I'm looking at the measuring tape up against the box there, and I'm gonna roll this up. Now, depending on the type of film that you're using, some of them are back rolled, some of them are rolled normally. This film right here is actually back rolled, so I have to make sure I'm shrinking it the correct way, and I'll explain to you what the back roll means in a second. So back roll means that it's rolled like this, okay? which means that this is the liner side, which needs to face me when I'm going to cut it out. Most films are going to be rolled the other way where the liner's on this side. So you'll lay it down this way with the curve against the car. So this is a little bit harder to work with when you're doing a back window because it wants to peel off the glass. And so that's basically what the back roll means. Now there's also back rolling when you're tinting like flat glass and stuff. You would back roll the film like this, peel the liner, and it would grab onto itself, and you just snap it, and then you'd be able to put it on a glass and by yourself. So what I like to do here, I like to grab this dryer sheet that I was using, go ahead and wet it. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of guesstimate the middle of the glass, and I'm gonna run and wet this area. Now you could go like this to create like an H pattern if you wanted to do that. You don't have to, but in this case I'm going to, because this film likes to peel itself off. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to get that edge here and overhang it about an inch or so above that top black part. You can go even further up. I actually went about 2 inches up. Just kind of want to keep pulling it off. And as it goes down, just make sure you're covering, and that's laid down there. Okay? So if you were doing a film that flips, that's the other way, it would be the same thing. It's just this would be flapping down instead of flapping up. But that's just because the way this film is designed. Now, what you want to do is grab like a hard card, and you want to flatten right there where you wet, and then flatten the sides. Now, no matter which kind of film you use, you never want to heat sideways. Unless you're a real expert at doing this, you don't really want to do that. You only do that once the film's already installed. You don't do it when you're shrinking it to get it ready to be installed. Because what will happen is the film will start doing this weird stuff, and then you won't be able to lay it down. So you want to make sure to try to avoid shrinking here and here. This is the horizontal edge. That's the horizontal edge. You want to heat this edge. You don't want to heat this edge. Okay? So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to turn on my light. I'm just going to kind of quickly trim it. I'm not going to trim it all the way down to like what's getting ready for install. This is like a pre-cut. So we want to go ahead and pre-cut it so that we can work with it a little bit easier. Now you want to snap your blade and then just make sure you're on the glass, and then just you're not pressing super hard. You're just trying to press enough to cut the film. Go ahead and cut that off. We're gonna do the same thing here. Just kind of run it down. Same thing over here. And then just go ahead and roll this piece up. Now we want to go ahead and trim that top edge, maybe about an inch and a half from that border edge that we're going to be cutting and trimming it to. Now the reason we don't cut this all the way perfect right now is because we're shrinking it. If for some reason, if we get to an edge and it kinks on us, or something bad happens because you don't know what you're doing, or you're just new at it, or even us experts that have been doing this a long time, sometimes the weather, whatever, maybe you put too much heat on it and it creases an edge. So if that's the case, you can always pull the film back, you can slide it down, and you can cut that off. Okay, so that's really important to know. Okay, so now that I have it kind of pre-cut, I'm going to shut off my light. Now I'm going to grab my heat gun. Now there's various types of heat guns. It's up to you what kind of heat gun you use. These are I get these are the Wagner ones. We get them at Home Depot. They're not too expensive. They're a little bit lightweight. And they're easy. They have two settings. They got like a low and a high. I usually, when I'm heat shrinking, unless it's a hard window like you have what we call fingers, and you'll start noticing once I start shrinking this, these are almost considered like fingers. It's like a finger, you know? And basically those are what's going to start happening. If you start separating that, you start noticing they look like fingers. Well, you kind of want to shrink them and get them to kind of look almost squiggly, and then you want to push them down. Now, depending on the film, some films are easier to work with than others. This one's kind of a little bit more on the difficult side, but we're gonna go ahead and give it a shot either way. So I'm gonna go ahead and start my heat gun on high. And I'm just gonna start right here. Now you can do this one of two ways. You can just sit here and shrink it like this and just kind of let it get that squiggly look to it. You could do it like that and go along and just keep doing the whole thing and then come back and then push it out, maybe 3 or 4 inches at a time. The way I normally do it is I'll actually work in quarters. So I'll basically separate this into one section, another section, another section, another section. Especially if you're a beginner, that's really important because it helps you shrink an area and it doesn't become so overwhelming. So we're gonna start right here. We're gonna go in like 2 to 3 inch areas and just kind of flatten it. Just gonna, I mean, we're probably about 4 to 5 inches away from the glass. And you're just gonna kind of push it. Now this window doesn't have a lot of curve to it. Some windows that have more curve, they're gonna be a little bit more difficult to heat shrink. So you're gonna take a little bit more time and kind of, you know, work that heat gun a little bit more, not just kind of run it across like the way I am. Now, I've been doing this for almost 29 years, so this is this window's not difficult to do. So then now I'm gonna start on this side and then I'll work my way to the top. So same concept, just kind of 2 to 3 inches and just kind of follow your heat gun and it's just wrinkling up and I'm pushing it out. That's all I'm doing. As soon as I see a wrinkle, I'm just pushing it down, pushing it, flattening it out. Now, again, you don't want to hit it to the edge. You want to keep that edge as flat as possible. I'm going to keep going. Now, once you become proficient at this, this will probably take you 10 minutes or less to heat shrink a back window. Now, you get into the more difficult vehicles, some of those are going to take a lot longer than that. It just depends on the weather sometimes. It depends on the film. But most of the time, it depends on the vehicle. So that's why when we quote prices on vehicles, they're not all the same price. You know, I get calls that people say, well, I got 7 windows, how much? I'm like, what kind of car? What does it matter? It matters because if I'm taking 2 hours on a car and I'm taking 4 hours on another car, I'm not charging the same price. So like this car right here, this is a 2013 Honda Civic. It's got 9 windows on it. Yes, all the windows count. This one has a bunch of small windows, which are a pain to do. They're not easy to do. So those take time. Those are actually the more difficult of the windows to do on this car, which would be these smaller ones right here and the ones up front. And there's a trick to doing those too. They're not very easy to do. There's a lot of prepping involved, and also like you have to put stuff in there so that you don't have any issues trying to get the film in there. So let's continue on with the back window. So same thing, I'm just gonna keep flattening this edge out so it doesn't, so I know not to go into that edge. So now we're gonna work towards the top section of the vehicle, which is basically the same thing. We're just gonna 2 to 3 inches and we're just gonna keep pushing. Now, if you didn't want to do it in quarters, you can just keep going across, okay? It's just whatever's easier for you. I think it's easier if like you've seen this bottom section, it was super easy. Now looking up the top, look what I just created. I kind of created a problem here because now I have these fingers are becoming bigger because I came all the way across instead of just cutting this off. And I can still cut this off now, but now I'm gonna have to fight this thing here. So sometimes what we do too is when we do this section flat, if I have a problem and I'm getting to a spot on the tint that I'm molding that looks like it's going to crease, I can actually pull this up, drop it down, and it releases some of that tension, and then just flatten it out maybe a little bit closer to the edge instead of like that full card. Now I'm about halfway there. Now this film has a little bit of room to it to kind of break that finger down, and it's not as big. So that's one of the reasons too people will do this, and it helps you if you're dealing with a hard window. And then also obviously not to heat over there, because you start running that heat gun like this, it's going to heat that edge. It's going to want to curl back on you. Now you're going to have problems. So we're going to continue on And I'm gonna kind of fast forward through this area real quick. And then we'll get to the next section that's basically trimming out the film. And then after that, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of lift one half of the film. And then I'm gonna squeegee it back down. I'm gonna hard card it back down with this card. And then what's gonna happen is I'm gonna go back with the heat gun again with the paper towel, and I'm gonna heat it one more time. So I'm basically heating it twice, but it's not gonna be like that. It's gonna be a lot easier to heat and a lot faster. I'm just not gonna explain that. So I'm gonna go through that real quick. And then once we get to that section, then I'll go ahead and I'll trim out the film. I'll turn on my light, trim out the film, and then we'll go from there and then start to install it. So one last thing before I go ahead and start to trim this out, is I'm gonna shut off the lights in the shop, and I'm gonna use like a little light to kind of flash on to the for sale signs and to this border if I have a hard area like I can't see. Sometimes when you have a brake light or something and you have those there, like that area might be a little harder to see, or these corners. So you can have a light there, and it helps you see so that you don't mess up and cut it wrong. So if you see me grab this light, you'll know that that's what I was doing. So a couple things, guys, before I go continue. I use a bucket inside the car. I do cover the interior up. I put blankets down and stuff like that, or like sheets. And I use a bucket to actually prop up my light. I got this one at Home Depot. It's really, really bright. It has a couple different settings on there. But this is nice because it doesn't really get hot. So if you're touching it up against the interior or something, you ain't gonna burn a customer's interior. So that's really important. So as you notice, the film is actually starting to kind of curl up over there. That's this type of film. It's not because I heated the corner or anything, or these sides. This film does that. So you have to be mindful, because this stuff will curl up and come off the car if you're not careful. I've had it curl off my glass before and fall on the floor. So this is what I'm gonna do. Now I'm gonna wet one side. I'm gonna wet the top. So I already dry shrunk it. Now I'm just gonna kind of do a quick second wet shrink. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flatten the film out. Now this step is optional. The reason I do this step is it keeps these fingers from popping up. So it makes it easier once the film's been installed. Now with some films, if it's a real cheap film, I would probably avoid that step. If it's a decent film, I've noticed that this really helps me. I almost don't get any finger. We call them fingers. They're like little spots. They look like a finger. They pop up on the top, on the bottom. And this really kind of keeps that from happening. So you want to wet that, kind of flatten it out with your hand. You don't want to just start doing it. Flatten it out, because you don't want to go like that and then kink the film. So you want to just take nice, semi-firm strokes. Use your hand to flatten it out. As I'm flattening it out, I'm kind of pushing. If I feel something too big, I kind of want to flatten it out more. And then just take my hard card back and forth, back and forth. Now next, I'm going to take a paper towel. I'm going to wrap my hard card in it. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to heat about 4 to 5 inches down and down and down. If you notice, like it's starting to, I don't know if you can see it on camera or not, but like you might notice like a finger or two popping up when you heat it, and then you're just flattening it out. So what would happen normally is if you go to install this film, the way it was before I did this, those spots are gonna pop up as soon as water hits it, okay? So if you do this now, you're basically kind of eliminating that happening. And then having to heat it, go back in the car, push it out, heat it, back in the car, and that's back and forth, I get really tired really quick. So, again, this is an optional step. You don't have to do this, but I like doing it because I found this tip online and I used it and it worked. I'm not going to give you guys tips that I don't use. You know, if I use something, I'm going to tell you about it. And this really is a game changer. Like, oh man, it was saving me 15, 20 minutes every car. Like, I was getting cars were popping up and I got to heat it up. Now I'm not getting them. Like, I put them in. I might get 1 or 2 spots, but you know, there might be something small and I can get them out real quick. But normally I don't get them. So, okay, so assuming that you've already prepped the inside of your window, and you're getting ready to install, the next thing I want to do is I want to take those for sale signs out. And basically for sale sign, no trash bin sign. So these are clean. If these weren't clean, then you're going to have to prep that window again. So I make sure to keep these in a clean spot where they're not going to be getting dirty, because they do go up against the glass. So you want to make sure to keep them in a clean spot. So next step, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to wet the window on the inside. We're just basically going to run some soap and water all along the window and then push some down. Now, if you want to put something in the trunk, maybe like a blanket. I did do that already. I didn't show that on camera, but I have stuff in the trunk because sometimes some of this water does run down. I don't use a lot of soap and water. I know some shops have complained that you know, some of the stuff gets wet in the trunk. They might be using maybe just a little bit too much soap and water, but getting enough enough just to mist it, because you're gonna wet this piece of film too. So now you have water there, and when you're pushing it down, some of that water can trickle into the trunk. Usually goes down in here. It doesn't damage anything, but if you have stuff in the trunk that can get wet, it can damage it. So you want to be careful. So I'm gonna go ahead and wet the inside real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and peel this liner, wet it, and then I'm gonna bring you around, okay? Because I don't want to keep moving my camera real quick. Now, when you pull this film, you want to pull it down like towards me this way and then across. That way it stays on the glass and it doesn't come flying off. But I wet a little bit behind her so that stays back down there. Toss that to the side, pick it up afterwards. And this, you do want to wet it very well because you want it to slide on you. Get your fingers nice and wet. And then now we're just going to get underneath the film. Try as the minimal amount to touch it. We're going to grab an edge. We're going to slide our hand underneath it, like so. Lift it off the glass and then put it underneath your arm like this. Not exposed as much. I'm going to go in now like this, like Frankenstein. Try not to touch anything. Okay, so you got your hands underneath here. You're kind of pushing it up against the glass. Try to get it to slide down. Now, don't try to push it all the way down in one shot. What you want to do is kind of get it as, you know, a good section, and then kind of start putting this area up here on your glass and look to make sure that each of the sides are going in correctly. And then you want to start to push down more, because it'll make it easier for you to push the film down if you got a little bit more film on the glass. And then as you're pushing it down, you're putting more film on the glass, kind of pushing it up. Make sure you don't hit the headliner. Get it far enough down. You have a little bit of a gap, and then you can push that up. Get rid of that gap. And make sure you don't have any gaps on the bottom or on the sides. Look it all over. Make sure you're all tucked in on the sides. Then it's not binding on anything. Okay, guys, so what we want to do is once we get our film all laid down, we want to wet it. You want to start going straight down like this, kind of. And then what you want to do is, depending on, you know, obviously we're professionals, so we have tools. So We have a bulldozer. These are great to get behind brake lights, like these ones here. Try to get behind there like that. That's one way to do it. Then we have these tools here that kind of, they're not as strong, so it's a little bit harder to get a lot of the water out. You know, you can do the job with that, but it's not great. And then we got this tool here that I like. I can't forget what it's called. I don't know if it's called the, I don't even remember what it's called. I think it's called the whale or something. So, I'm sure it's wet and it's curved. So what you do is you put your finger in here and as you push on it, it creates like a pressure on the glass and it flattens it out and it takes the water out. In this car, it's real hard to get down in those corners because they're really, really tight. So I use this real thin curved tool. This thing is not very strong, but it will at least pick up the water. And that's what I want. I want to pick up the water from these corners right here where it likes to sit. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now that's squeegee. Then you want to go back and then you want to use like what we call a Blue Max. Now this one here is an Orange Crush. This one's a real soft squeegee. It's good to like kind of lay the film up there and kind of give it the first pass. And then this is a harder squeegee. And I got it on a Fusion 5 handle. It kind of gives it a little bit easier for you to kind of create a little bit of pressure. And then you want to start with small little strokes like this, like maybe 4 or 5 inches. And then just, you know, you're trying to push all that water out. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to try to put it on this towel, see if I can fit it in there. Try to pick up some of that water that's all along the edges. I'll take a paper towel now, my hard card, and then I'm going to bump all the edges. And then we're going to go ahead and clean our glass and clean all our tray. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go outside the vehicle. We're going to clean off the rest of that bounce stuff that got left over on the glass. We're going to use some paper towels and some soap and water first, and then we'll use our cleaner to finish it up. And then I'm just going to spray a little detailer on here to clean the rest of the car. That pretty much does it. Like if there's any spots or anything, look it over. Might have to heat it and push them out. I don't see too much on here. That pretty much does it, guys. Thanks for watching.